Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to tackle a big question today, a question that's got people all over the world talking and debating. Can AI-created content be copyrighted? We've got this amazing report from the U.S. Copyright Office. It just came out this month, January 2025, and it really digs deep into this very topic. So get ready, because the answers, they're more complex than you might think, and they could have a huge impact on, the future creativity and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before we get into all that, I kind of want to set the stage a bit. Can you give us like a quick overview of, the legal side of copyright here in the U.S.? Like, what are the ground rules?
Well, the US Constitution, it's pretty clear about this copyright protection. It requires human authorship. There's no way around it. It's got to be a human.
So if I'm using AI like to help me write a song or something, does that automatically mean I can't copyright it?
Well, that's where things start to get really interesting. This isn't a new problem. Back in the 1880s when photography was brand new, the Supreme Court actually had to decide if photographs could even be copyrighted.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they had to figure out, were they just products of a machine or could they be considered, art?
They decided they were art, right? I vaguely remember something about the photographer's choices being the deciding factor.
Exactly. You're right on the money. The court, they said that the photographer's choices, like the composition, the lighting, the subject matter, all that, it transformed this mechanical process into something more artistic. And
Hmm.
those human choices, those were key to establishing authorship.
So how does all that relate to AI-generated content? Is it basically like a super advanced camera?
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. If we think of AI as a tool, like a camera or a paintbrush, the person using it, they might still be the author. But here's the tricky part. Figuring out what happens when the AI starts making more and more of the creative decisions on its own. Where do we draw that line?
Right. And to make things even more complicated, most people interact with AI through prompts, right? Like you tell it to create a landscape with a hidden robot or something like that.
Exactly. And that's where a big legal debate comes in. Are those prompts just basic ideas? Or do they give the user enough control over the AI's output to claim, authorship?
So what do you think? If you gave that prompt to an AI and it made like 10 totally different images, would you feel like you were the real author of all of them?
That's a fantastic question. And according to this Copyright Office report, they're leaning towards no, at least for now. They say using prompts alone isn't enough for copyright because they believe the AI is doing a lot of the creative heavy lifting.
Wow, that's a big deal. So does that mean that most of the AI content we see online like isn't protected at all?
It seems that way based on how the US law is being interpreted right now, but there are some nuances to think about. The report, it highlights a few specific situations where copyright protection might still be possible.
Okay, this is already so interesting. I can't wait to dig into those nuances. So let's start with the first one. What if you use your own creative work as a starting point for the AI? You know?
That's a great question, and the report actually dives into a situation like that. Let's say you don't just describe your vision in words, but you sketch out like a preliminary design yourself and then use AI to like refine it or add details.
Oh,
Would that make a difference?
that seems like you'd have a much stronger argument for human authorship there.
It does, doesn't it? And the report highlights a case where an artist did exactly that. They submitted a work to the Copyright Office where they had created an initial sketch and then used AI to develop it further. And the Copyright Office, they decided to grant copyright protection for that original artwork, even though the final result was heavily influenced by AI.
So it sounds like having a tangible piece of human creation as a foundation, that makes a big difference.
It really does.
But what about making changes to something the AI generated? Like if I take an AI image and edit it, does that give me any ownership rights?
That's another area where you might be able to stake a claim. The report suggests that, significant modifications to AI-generated content could be considered authorship. So if you're adding new elements, changing the composition, or really transforming the work in a creative way, those changes could be protected.
So it sounds like there are some pathways for human creators to establish ownership, even in this AI-driven world. But let's be real, most people aren't going to go through all the trouble of crafting these super detailed prompts or creating original artwork before they even start using AI. What about, those who are just experimenting with AI tools for fun or for personal projects?
Yeah.
What happens to their creations?
That's a really important question, and to be honest, it's one that doesn't have a clear answer yet. This whole landscape of AI and copyright, it feels a bit like the Wild West right now. Everyone's trying to figure things out as we go.
I agree. And that's why this report from the Copyright Office is so valuable. It's a starting point for establishing some much needed guidelines in this uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
Speaking of uncharted territory, this isn't just a U.S. issue, is it? Other countries must be grappling with these same questions.
Absolutely. This is a global conversation, and the approaches to AI copyright, they vary from country to country.
So we've got the U.S. leaning heavily on human authorship.
Mhm.
What are some other approaches we're seeing around the world?
Well, for instance, China has taken a different route. They've actually begun granting copyright protection for some AI-assisted works, focusing more on the level of human input and control involved in the creation process.
That's a fascinating contrast. So we've got this spectrum of perspectives emerging, which I'm sure will lead to even more complicated discussions as AI becomes more integrated into our creative processes. This all raises a lot of questions about the future of creativity itself.
You've touched on a really important point. It's not just about legal definitions anymore. As AI evolves, we're being forced to reconsider what it even means to be a creator.
Right, if AI can create works that are basically indistinguishable from human-created content, how do we define authorship in that context? And does AI-generated art even hold the same value as art created by a person?
Those are some really big questions.
Yeah, some people are even worried that AI could eventually make human artists, obsolete. Do you think that's a real possibility?
Well, I think it's understandable that artists might have those concerns. Throughout history, every time a new technology has emerged, it's disrupted the creative landscape. But we've also seen how those fields adapt and evolve. Photography didn't replace painting, and film didn't destroy theater.
They found ways to coexist and even complement each other.
Right, and AI might not replace human artists altogether, but it could definitely change the way they work. It could be an incredibly powerful tool for collaboration and for pushing creative boundaries in ways we can't even imagine yet.
So maybe instead of fearing AI, we should think of it as a new kind of creative partner.
That's a great way to put it. But even if we embrace AI as a collaborator, there's still this huge unresolved issue of ownership. If AI-generated content doesn't have a clear human author who controls it.
The million-dollar question, right? And right now, the legal landscape is incredibly murky. Does the company that developed the AI own all the output? Does the user have any rights? What about all the people using AI to create for fun or personal projects? Is all that content just floating around in some sort of copyright limbo?
It's a bit of a free-for-all at the moment, and that opens the door for potential problems. Imagine companies claiming ownership over vast amounts of AI-generated content, essentially locking it up behind paywalls or restrictive licenses.
That doesn't sound good. That sounds like it could really stifle creativity and limit the free flow of ideas online.
Right.
What can we do to prevent that kind of outcome?
It's clear that we need to start thinking about these issues now. We need clearer legal frameworks and ethical guidelines for AI and copyright. It's a complex challenge, though, because we have to find a balance between protecting the rights of creators and recognizing the incredible potential of AI to transform our world.
It sounds like we need a global conversation about this, involving everyone from artists and developers to policymakers and even just casual users of AI tools.
Absolutely. We all have a stake in shaping the future of AI and creativity. We can't just sit back and wait for the legal and ethical implications to sort themselves out.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've uncovered some truly mind-boggling complexities and possibilities.
And we've only just begun to explore this rapidly evolving landscape.
You're absolutely right. But hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable insights and food for thought as we navigate this uncharted territory together. So as we wrap up, we'd like to leave you with one final question to ponder. What kind of future do we want to create in the age of AI? How can we ensure that technology empowers us, not controls us? And what role will human creativity play in this new world? Keep those questions in mind and keep exploring.